Listeners of the Randomness of Nothing podcast, this is your host, Rashad Woods. As you all know, I always try to talk to people from all walks of life that are fascinating and carved out their own paths in their careers, life journeys, and sometimes life throws them curveballs during that journey, and it happens through necessity as opposed to discovering something and by tinkering around with it. This gentleman here is willing to share his story, Mark Burnett. It's a very personal story about Parkinson's, neurology, and the human condition and spirit of how to heal yourself. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Shad. I really appreciate it. Essentially, just to give a little history, my situation started back. I was in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, which is well known for, unfortunately, having toxic water. I was born there in 1958, making me 67 years old. I should be nice, retired now, sitting on a beach and enjoying myself, right? It ain't happening. When you get hit, thrown those curveballs, you put aside vacations, you put aside the things you want to do with your family and everything else, and you focus on how do I take care of myself? Right. I'm in trouble. And in my case, I had Parkinson's that came from that base, that base is 70% higher in Parkinson's than any other base the government tested, which is huge. But I also had the gene marker for Alzheimer's. Yeah. So I was fighting two different neurological diseases at the same time. I had gone to the neurologist. They had given me all the tests. They gave me medicine from the 60s. How old is this medicine? It was like, we found out about it in the 60s, still using the same cardopa medicine they've been using forever for Parkinson's. I said, how about Alzheimer's? They're like, try to work on memory and exercise. I'm like, oh, that's not gonna work. I can't even remember what I'm supposed to do. Yeah. That wasn't good enough for me. Mm-hmm. I have spent my life being a database programmer. I built databases for some of the largest companies in the world. And part of what I used to do is start from a blank screen and build. Yeah. And people tell me what they wanted, and I had to learn how to do the research and how to figure out how to do things. Right. To me, this was the same thing. How do you look at something that's impossible, that basically people die from Parkinson's? People die from Parkinson's for sure. Yeah. A lot of famous people, Michael J. Fox got Parkinson's when he was 29, which is very young to have Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. One of my best friends died of Parkinson's. So I do know what it's like. And I have some other friends with Parkinson's. So my goal kind of became, I don't want to follow that path. I don't want to go down that road. So I started studying. I started doing research. Fortunately, the web allows us to do a lot of that. AI allows us to do a lot of that. Right. And I came across a Japanese study, which they actually cured mice from Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is crazy. They cured it. How did they do it? And the thing that happened with that scientific experiments that they did at a university in Japan was they were funded by Big Pharma, which a lot of these groups, of course, are funded by Big Pharma. Mm-hmm. They could not figure out how to make this natural product that came from a seed, from a fruit tree I never heard of before, called Zisifat.
I know I had to try to break it down phonetically to actually write it down, right? Because I'm like...
Yeah, even how to pronounce it.
No, right.
But the problem was, just like apples, which are, most people don't know, there's 7,500 different varieties of apples, an enormous amount of apples, because you think all the hybrids and everything else that are out there, right?
Yeah.
They're crazy. This plant had 100 different varieties. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I had to find the right cultivator they used with the mice. And since they couldn't turn it into a drug, the scientific experiments got dropped, the money got dropped, and nothing happened. And that's what happens, unfortunately, with a lot of cures out there, if you will. They get thrown on the floor because if they can't charge you $10,000 a month, it's not worth them to fund it.
The ROI.
The way it goes, right? So for me, it was like, well, why don't I just become the next mouse? Right. I mean, it worked for them. I mean, it might not work for me, but what other choices did I have? Mm-hmm. So the first thing I did was source the product. I got it. I learned how to make it for myself in January 2025. I started taking it. I was at stage 3 to 4 Parkinson's. That's where the neurologist says you're one step away from a walker. You're falling down too much. I'd already knocked myself out once by a fall, real bad, split my head open.
Oh my gosh.
tripped many times, had what's called pill roll. So you pick up something and you roll your hand and you couldn't hold on to it.
Yeah.
You drop things.
Can I just ask you briefly, if I could ask? So,
Sure.
even though you had the contaminated water that you were born on the Marine base, and I read your story, and I'm just asking briefly, was it something that started curating even as a child over time, that you were more susceptible, but as age came on, it became more prevalent? Is that kind of an accurate description?
That's a very accurate description. And most doctors did not recognize the early symptoms of what that was. That nerve damage, actually, I had root canals in every one of my teeth. Every dentist who ever saw me said, I've never seen anyone with this many root canals. I take an x-ray of your teeth and you're like, everything's been, root canals. I said, yeah, because they're highly sensitive, but no one knows why. Yeah. And so this nerve damage was already happening. And I had, people might be embarrassed to talk about it, but I had ED when I was Michael J. Fox's age at 29.
Because of everything.
Not exactly the time you want to have ED. It's kind of hard to think.
It's mainstream now, but at the time, of your age, I say this respectfully, that was like something that wasn't talked about in every day.
Oh, doctors were like,
yeah. Keep it real, and I'm glad you're willing to share it, because it's a health condition. In all seriousness,
it is a health condition, right? Condition. And I found out later that a lot of people that get Parkinson's start off with getting ED. Yeah. So that was interesting in my research, that can be a prerequisite to leading into that. And that's because by the nerve bundles that create those elements in ED are the same nerve elements that create urine flow and things like that. Right. So I was having all these conditions nobody could put together. I had fatty liver, yet I didn't drink. So I was like, well, how do I have fatty liver? And they're like, we have no idea. You have elevated liver enzymes, all these things. But when you look at it from a Camp Lejeune, being poisoned standpoint, or getting in contact with weed killers, Arquat, very well known right now for that. Other weed killers, PCE, which is used in brake cleaner fluid. That was the same chemical in Camp Lejeune, exact same chemical. Wow. And United States only got around to banning that chemical in December of 2024.
I'm sorry. There's a separate situation, obviously John Wayne was a heavy smoker, but they said the reason he died was because of the movie The Conqueror, when they were dropping the A-bombs in, Utah and Idaho, and they were filming only like 150 miles away from the downdrift of the wind, right? And then every single cast member, I think like 12 different people in the cast, all died of cancer within like 2 years.
Exactly. No. And you're looking at the same thing here, where one scientist called Parkinson's a pandemic, because he said chemicals are everywhere. They're in every country. They're used everywhere. Who doesn't use brake cleaner fluid anywhere in the world, or some chemical there to clean metal off. And they all are in contact. And my friend who worked as an auto mechanic has Parkinson's and skin cancer, because he'd spray it and spray back in his face, on his body, on his hands. That's how he got it. So he's actually taking the product I have. But what happened in 2025, January, where I was at that stage 3-4, I had already been tested in 2023 for Alzheimer's, and I came back in the red. I knew that I had the gene for it already. Through 23andMe had pointed that out. So I said, well, let's get the blood work done. Let's see. Oh, yeah. No, I have Alzheimer's. And I could feel it. I used to program, walk in a room, knew what I was going to code, sit down and forget. I couldn't remember why I went in the room. And the worst feeling you can have in your life is I was driving home, been down the road 20 years down that road, and I couldn't remember how to go home.
So you can see in real time what was happening. So like in real time, that this is...
It was frightening beyond belief, and you're a guy, so you don't press Google, take me home.
No, it's not happening. What you mean?
No, I got enough gas. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
And eventually I made it home, but by then my heart's pounding. I'm like, my gosh, what just happened to me? And I'm tripping, I'm falling. So I've got these two different diseases going on, and I'm like, how am I gonna deal with this? And then this is gonna put a huge, situation on my family, which would be my caregivers, my wife, my children, that would all have to help me. And I was just like, I can't go down this road. Right. And in 2025, when I was able to source the product and get exactly what they use. And then make it in a special way. We had to make it what we call ultra chill mill, where we really chill the mills that turn at 30,000 revolutions per minute. These things are fast. They have to,
What kind of machine was
grind
it
these
that turned it?
steep.
Like, how did you know what equipment to get for that?
Well, again, that was all about research.
Okay.
I looked at all the different mills that were out there. I looked at what I could modify to be able to expand it to use this ultra chill mill method I wanted to use. Essentially, it's almost like putting Freon coils around it to chill it down, very, very cold. And have it grind, and then I have to sift. We have to have sifters and all this, all mechanical, to do all these kind of things,
Right.
and then in the end make it so that it could be sold, at some point where it would be reasonably priced. All these were factors that I knew from programming. You have to think ahead, and how do you ramp up?
Yeah.
But first, the 6 months was I told no one. I just said, I'm going to try it myself. Mm-hmm. Tell my neurologist I'm not taking the cardopa anymore. And she was like, well, it's not really helping you that much anyway. So that's fine. Yeah. Give it a shot. She didn't have any other suggestions. And so I used it, but I started noticing within about 3 to 4 months, I started noticing I was much sharper. My brain was clearer. I was functioning better. Yeah. And then not noticing I wasn't tripping and falling was something that was odd to me, because you're so used to being normal.
To it.
Yeah, when you go back to being normal, you're like, you had to think back and go, wait a minute, this week I didn't fall down, or I didn't trip upstairs, or fall down. I joke with people. I say I have Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. If I fall downstairs, I can't remember why.
I herniated a disc in my back, and it was and it was one of the most, I don't think the average person really understands how delicate the spine is until it actually doesn't work the way it's supposed to. And then, so long story short, when it finally got, back to normal, and I was able to knowing that you can bend without pain was like the weirdest feeling in the world. Right. And it was tough to even get off the couch to like walk across a room. Right. That's how debilitating. And then when you actually you don't realize how precious to do that is. You don't.
No, you don't. And sometimes, and you probably did it too, as it gradually got better for those weeks or whatever, you might not have noticed it immediately that, all of a sudden it came in your head like, wow, yes. I can do this and it doesn't hurt anymore.
Right.
And it was the same with me. I had the same thing. I didn't realize that the Parkinson's was starting to subside. Mm-hmm. And so I kept taking the product, which is easy to take. We make it in a powder form. So it's very, very easy for Parkinson's people because they have trouble swallowing sometimes. So we don't want to make pills. Right. So it goes in pudding, yogurt, milk, anything cold, okay, which is important. You just take it once a day. I took it once a day, the 2X active version we have of My Brain Restore is what it's called. Right. And when I got to about the 5th month of taking it, I was like jumping up and down, running upstairs. I was like, I'm really rocking here. And I'd already gone to Amazon and bought construction shoes with steel plates.
Yeah.
Because I hurt my toes so many times. I broke a ligament in one. You just bust your toes. You can't lift your feet right. And that helped. But I took those shoes and I set them aside and I grabbed myself a nice pair of tennis shoes. I got those and I signed up for the Michael J. Fox Marathon.
I saw that.
And I said, you know what? I think I can do this. I feel right. I feel different. And my wife was totally against it because she said, I've seen you. You're going to fall. You're going to hurt yourself. I said, no, I can do this. I went out there. I ran that race. And when I got done, there were a lot of people running for Parkinson's people, but not necessarily Parkinson's people. Yeah. But I was running with a few and actually slowed down to catch up with, have them catch up with me. Yeah. I slowed down and started talking to them, jogging with them and stuff like that. And they're like, what in the world are you using? Right. You passed us freaking rabbit, And I told them what I had, what stage I had, and they're like, I'm stage 2, and I can barely do this. And when I got done, people were like, how do I get what you got? And then you go from, now I've got people that want to buy it,
right?
And I didn't even have a label.
So that leads me to my next set of questions, right? So, and you probably answered this a dozen times, but never on this show. So you have the FDA, you have Obviously, you have your disclaimers where you can't say it cures diseases. You can only say, hey, this worked for
Correct.
me, right? Because, for all intents and purposes, everybody's body's different, and there's a drug
Yeah.
approval process, and yours isn't a drug; it's just
Yeah.
a natural herb that you decided to ingest. And then the second stage
Yeah.
is how far along is somebody with their symptoms that this can help?
Well, so far I've had people at extreme levels, people that have had the electrodes planted in the brain to control the tremors. They're using it. I have one gentleman who has it so bad he has a pump installed, up here so he can press the pump to give him dopamine like every 3 hours. And he started using it. And this guy got so excited about it because he goes, Mark, I started using your product, and within 2 months, I'm pumping it every 6 hours. Now I'm pumping it every 8 hours. So he said, okay, so you're seeing a quantity effect. In other words, that your body's starting to make its own dopamine. That's why you're not pressing it as much. Right. And he goes, yeah, exactly. Because I couldn't function without doing it every 3 hours. And he literally bought me plane tickets to go down and see him at his house.
That's beautiful.
I mean, this guy was well off. He was a very nice guy. He brought me his doctor. He brought me in an office with a bunch of other people, and he said, let's all sit down and talk about this because Mark over here's got $1 billion product.
Yeah, about to say, yeah, exactly. So, right, so he's having like the Tupperware party, so to speak. He's like, yeah, you know what I mean?
No, literally he was. And he's like, guys, this is huge. And I want you guys to jump in. You all know me. Am I doing better? And they're all like, yeah, we know him. He wouldn't even stay in this meeting. He'd be gone by now.
Yeah.
And then I started noticing somehow I got in a group, a forum or something where doctors were involved, and they must have read about me. So I started seeing on the website, mybrainrestore.com, the website, I started seeing these orders with DR in front of the name.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, these are doctors, ordering my product. Weird. And so I'm reaching out.
Trademark it.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm sending a few messages, and I got to talk to 2 of them. One of them was a neurosurgeon, retired. He was like, I've been buying your product there, if you notice, for like 4 or 5 months now. It's working great for me. Wow. And I can tell you one thing, if you can help the brain clear itself of these things, it will do its self-repair. I'm a neurosurgeon. I know what I'm talking about. Okay. And I said, you're not just a neurosurgeon. You're taking my product, Mr. Neurosurgeon. You don't know anything else? He goes, no. Yeah. Anything else has so many side effects. It's ridiculous. I'm not getting involved.
Did you have a science background, or was it just sheer will that led you to this moment?
I actually was studying originally to be a veterinarian.
Okay.
So my background was science. I had worked at an animal hospital when I was 14 years old, which nowadays you can't get a job at an animal hospital. OSHA would send you out of there.
There's lots of laws that you weren't allowed, that have since passed that, people look back.
Well, back then, my mom knew the guy who owned the animal hospital, and they were a big animal hospital practice. And they're like, well, what happens if he gets bit? Well, we can stitch you up.
You're not thinking about liability purposes right
it's
here.
The
right?
old days.
No.
Yeah, it's like, kid, get to work. You want to be a vet, learn. So I was literally in surgery. They had me work in the anesthesia machine. They taught me that. I helped with x-rays. I did a microscope. So I had this strong background in science and, how to cure things and how to deal with that. But then when I was in school still, because this is young, in 1975, I was probably one of the first hackers because our school had gotten a terminal from the University of Maryland's mainframe. And we had 2 of them, one in the guidance room, one in trigonometry. I wasn't in trigonometry. Okay. Yeah. But my friend was, and he says, well, I think the password will work down at the guidance place. So I went in there and I asked the guidance counselor. I had this nice sheet over the computer because she had no idea how to use it. And it was one of these ones with the phone. You had the dial, hear this tone, put it in, 300 baud modem, connected to the University of Maryland's mainframe. And I taught myself how to code.
So you were Matthew Broderick in War Games before War Games came out.
Burning up time on the University of Maryland's mainframe.
You were War Games before War Games then, huh?
You broke up a little.
I'm sorry. So you were Matthew Broderick in War Games before War Games then, huh?
Well, for me, it was a transition. I understood science already. And to me, this was an element of science I wasn't used to. But I also realized something new, where before you had to treat diseases in animals and things of that nature, and you had to try to, a dog or cat can't talk to you, so you don't know what happened to
Very
them,
true.
So there's a lot of investigation you have to figure out, a lot of thinking you have to do. But with computers, it was that blank screen blinking at you, and you knew where you wanted to go and what you wanted to accomplish. But you had to be able to have the knowledge, or I should say, the magic in your brain, if you will, to say, let me be an artist. Let me start drawing here. And you make 1,000 mistakes. When you're coding, things blew up. I got blue screens of death. All those kind of things happen all the time. But you know what? You don't worry about that.
Of course
you
not.
don't care about that.
Of course
you focus on what's the end result. What do I need to do? For me, it was, how do I reverse 2 neurological diseases? If the daggone mice can do it, then, I might as well just follow the mice.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what I did. But then in further research, I found out that the Dutch had discovered a system called the glymphatic system, not lymphatic. Everyone knows, familiar with that term. But the glymphatic system was named by a Dutch scientist, and she had studied it in 2012, that there was another system in the brain that cleared all these things that Parkinson's, dementia, and Alzheimer's lock into the brain, and it can't get out. And she believed it was triggered by inflammation, which could be caused by chemicals. So when you put it all together, to me, it was like, there you go. There's a computer program. Okay, this equals that. What
it's a
the
very
Japanese
linear answer to this question.
Perfect. Right. Exactly. So to me, it was like, okay, let's see how it'll work on my Parkinson's. Number one, I ran into Michael J. Fox thing. Now, how's it going to work on my Alzheimer's? I knew I was sharper, but I had done the blood work back in 2023, which said I was, the Alzheimer's poster child. I was so bad. They're like, you got the gene marker, you got the blood wrong, everything's wrong. And I Googled it, and it says you cannot reverse that blood work. It's impossible. I went to my doctor. I said, I'd like to get that blood work done again. They said, no, I'm not going to order it because your insurance probably is not going to pay for it because it's not reversible. I called around to 10 doctors. You finally get an online doctor who wants $25. Okay. And as soon as you get that, right, you go with it, right? That's just the way I think, right? Hey, can you order this for me? They're like, yeah, I want the same test, same lab. I want everything exactly the same. I got that test in October of 2025, and I was 10% better than I was in 2023.
That's amazing.
And I was like, that was an aha moment, okay, where I said, okay, I just moved the bar on something that Google says is impossible. Now, I pushed the limit in March 2026. I redid that test from the same lab again, going back to that same doctor. I said, let's keep doing it. I'm still taking the medicine. Where am I at now? Did I get worse? Did I stay the same? Now I'm 20% better.
That's amazing.
At 7% more, which I assume will be in like July, I will be out of the red zone and into the green zone on Alzheimer's, meaning I've beaten it completely. And I'll be the first person in the world to beat Alzheimer's.
So my question is, how did you know how much to take? Like, how did you know, like, the dosage, the frequency?
Well, the scientific studies had what they gave the mice, but it's a little hard to convert mice size to
the heart size is different, more ventricles, more like, it's a mammal, but that's about the only similarity that you're dealing with right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. A bite of cheese versus I might eat a whole bar of cheese. What's the difference? The question is not getting caught in the trap. And the thing I started to realize was, well, I just needed to start taking it where mathematically I could figure it made the most sense. And that turned out at first to be like 2 scoops of the product, and the product, this is without the cover on. This is what the product looks like with the cover.
Yeah.
So there's our product. Yeah. We have the jar on top here.
Yes.
Okay. But the product inside is a powder like that. So very easy to take. And I started off with just taking a couple scoops. We got a scooper, which is a half teaspoon, and then trying to figure out, well, what could I mix it in with that would work, that would stay cold? Because I knew that heat was the real bad issue here. You can't put it in hot tea. You can't put it in hot coffee. Anything like that will destroy its neurological effects 100%. That was already known. The scientists knew that, and it was known prior to that. And so I started mixing in a little bit with pudding and a little bit with that. I could tolerate it. So really, for me, it was like, well, how do I figure out where the toleration level is?
Yeah.
And for me, I was able to take 4 scoops every day, and I started noticing changes. So that's as far as I went at that time. I eventually got into doing, like 6 scoops. Sometimes I try a little bit more to see if that would cause any issues or any problems. Sometimes I get a little headache, but then again, what are we working on? The head. So there was some logic that, that might cause that. And we do put that in our warnings.
Yeah.
But do I have doctors with the DR taking, 6 scoops? Yes. Like, I'm like, wait a minute, you're the doctors, guys. You're not listening to me. He goes, patients never listen to anybody.
So you're right, and they're patients themselves. Is there any effect on somebody that says, hey, this is, and if you don't know, that's, I understand, like, hey, either somebody's taking it who doesn't have symptoms, who wants to ward off future because of potential problems and, lineage, so to speak. It doesn't have any harm to somebody who doesn't have any symptoms.
Well, actually, obviously Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia runs in families.
Correct.
So we have a lot of people that are buying it as a preventive. We do sell a preventive version, which is basically half the dose,
Mm-hmm.
Same product. We didn't make any difference to what it was, but you take 2 scoops instead of 4.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference. But we're also getting ready to announce a gaming version, which is actually for gamers, because and people who do any kind of mental type of things, because the Japanese experiments also proved, when they got done proving it would cure the neurological diseases, they then had all these control mice. And they said, what happens if we give it to the control mice?
Yeah.
And they gave it to the control mice, and the mice could run the mazes 20% faster.
Wow.
And they were like, okay, this is preventive, and it's also a nootropic. It's helping people's brains clear quicker. It's helping them deal with memory better. So taking tests or cramming for things of that order, it was helping those people. So we have a gamer version. The Dutch had found that the glymphatic system also helps clear out stroke components and brain injuries. Of that order. So we have a sports version coming out, which is going to be for, football, impact traumatic brain injury, soccer players, those are just going to help them stay out of trouble, or could keep a multi-million-dollar NFL football player in a game.
I mean,
if they can get better in a 2 weeks versus a couple of months, what's that worth?
Yeah, that's always fascinating, because now they have to keep their drug protocols. I'm not saying anything would be flagged, but now they have to, if that's a potential thing that they could be using, they have to obviously do their research on that to make sure, like, hey, this is proven to work. Let's update that so a guy doesn't quote unquote pop dirty, or a woman pop dirty because they're using this. So but
the most amazing thing has just happened, and that was in January. Just a couple months ago, my neurologist retested me and said, Mark, to be honest, and she wrote in there, I'm taking my Brain Restore from mybrainrestore.com. She wrote it right in her paperwork, and she said, I cannot see Parkinson's in you right now.
That's incredible.
She said, it's just not there. And she goes, I've never seen this happen. She goes, I'm going to talk to my partner. And we're going to start trying to offer it to some of our clients and things like that.
That's absolutely amazing.
It's new, and everybody's, obviously, new things get scary. But, to me, more scary is the option of these drug companies who say, we're going to repurpose a cancer drug. And this is already happening to make it work on Parkinson's. And the UK just rejected it, one of these cancer drugs, where they did a combination of cancer drugs, because it was only 35% effective, and it costs $250,000 treatment.
I was about to say, yeah.
Who can afford that?
Yeah.
Okay, it's way out of the scope of everyone who would have this type of disease,
Right.
And they said 35% is not worth it,
right.
Especially with the tremendous side effects that it had. So there's a lot of repurposing going on and trying, but the point is, it's sort of like unplugging a drain. If you think of this glymphatic system and you take the plunger and all this gunk comes up, but it doesn't drain.
Right.
So if you don't fix the drain, which our product supports that glymphatic system, drainage system, that's the key. You've got to get that. And the only way I could prove that worked was by the blood work, because the amyloid beta test that I took for Alzheimer's was not changeable because it couldn't get out of the brain. But because the ratios changed in my favor, it meant that the amyloid beta was moving out of the brain, where it was getting stuck into the bloodstream and being broken down by the liver like it's supposed to.
That's why you had the blood test that you did.
I don't care. I've given so much blood, I don't have any. I'm hoping my spleen can keep up.
Man, you got me crying over here. Are you restricted on your advertising because of what you represent in the product that you're selling? How does that encompass of how you can promote it?
Yeah, well, we'd all like to go out there and say, I can say what it's done for me, and people doing reviews can say what it's done for them. That's totally fine. That's not an issue. But we do put on there that, it's not an FDA approved product. It is a supplement, a nootropic. Essentially, we can't say that it cures these things or anything like that. People have to make up their own mind. I mean, they can just based upon my journey, which if you go up on mybrainrestore.com and you hit FAQs and you click on free PDFs, you can download my book.
Beautiful.
So the book is free, and people can read my journey all the way from Camp Lejeune to my discovery components, okay? Mm-hmm. And they can learn about, how this actually works. And with that, I think that helps because there's not a lot of this knowledge out there. Yeah. I was always frustrated by doctors in the U.S. You got 7 minutes with them. They got 2 more patients in the other room, and here's some pills. Go home. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, right? Because when I had my back injury, right, and I'm taking this product called cyclopiobenzaprine, and anybody who's ever taken that muscle relaxer, and this is not, I'm not joking when I say this, it will literally put you to sleep in 5 minutes. And I never Googled it. I never researched it. It just was like you went to the local pharmacy, you grabbed the sets of pills, and then I would wake up 6 hours later. And I literally, I didn't even, and I'm talking out of it, waking up, how when you wake up out of a deep sleep and you literally don't even know what's going on around you.
Yeah, you have no idea. You don't know what day it is, right?
Completely, it was so bad one time. I saw, my family sitting at the dinner table, and I thought it was breakfast. Because I literally thought it was breakfast. I was like, what are you guys doing? I said, because I slept I couldn't hear it. It was, so to your point, that's how powerful some of the stuff that literally is just being handed to you and you're just guinea pigging it in your mouth. Yep, cool. Yeah. Your doctor told you to do it.
Right. Yeah. And the problem with taking the cardopa or the dopamine, I'll make a relationship here to Ozempic and insulin. Okay. Yeah. And here's what you have to think about. If you take insulin, you're really taking insulin and you're not really sure if you're giving yourself the right amount all the time. People died from taking too much insulin. They do. Okay. I have a good doctor friend who died from taking too much insulin. He got an emergency call. He hadn't eaten his breakfast yet. He took his fast-acting insulin. He got the emergency call. He's on the phone talking. He hung up the phone, hit the floor, went into a coma and died.
That's terrible.
And this is okay. But, he just didn't have time to eat and he'd already taken the fast-acting insulin. I was diabetic, had the insulin also, but I had the long-acting insulin, but I switched to Ozempic. And when I switched to Ozempic, my doctors and everyone had always told me those cells in your body that make insulin are dead. They're in the pancreas. They no longer work. There's no way to get them working. Well, what Ozempic proved was, yes, you can. Yeah. Those work. Yeah. And my doctor didn't tell me to stop taking the insulin. Yeah. So fortunately, I'm wearing one of these patches. My phone's going off at 3 o'clock in the morning. Eat a candy bar, you're going to die. Yeah. And you learn, Doc, why didn't you take me off that? Oh, yeah, I probably should have. Yeah. I know it ain't your body, but nevertheless.
It's only my health.
You're not the one at 3 o'clock in the morning running around, licking sugar off the floor.
Somewhere is a Jim Carrey skit that I'm seeing going on.
It's the way it is. I'm so used to the battling, Oh my God. And for me, it was, it was really, I realized, okay, Ozempic is making that work. Isn't that the same problem in the brain? Isn't the glymphatic system essentially acting as a blockage component? And the cancer medicines are breaking it up, but it can't drain. So if it can't get out through that system, which was probably for me damaged by Camp Lejeune, but for other people damaged by who knows what, weed killer, any sort of inflammation, long-term COVID. I mean, they have a lot of list of things that the glymphatic
look at
system.
asbestos was used in industrial buildings until the 70s, right?
Yeah, Lyme disease. I've got people taking this for Lyme disease, things like that, because they get the foggy brain. Okay, so the concept that if you move those things out of the brain, if you can get the brain system, the glymphatic system, which our system, and I can say this supports that glymphatic system. So legally, I can say that wording. By doing that and supporting it and getting it to move, what happens afterwards is a cleanup crew, and that's the key. That's why I am where I'm at with Parkinson's. That's why my Alzheimer's is one step away from me going to the Alzheimer's Association and saying, hey, that white flower you're going to award, and they are, to the first person who beats Alzheimer's. I've already told them, I said, you're going to award it to me. I've told 3 or 4 of them. They're like, okay, when you hit the green, we'll talk.
I got to tell you this.
I'm like, well, we won't talk. You'll be handing me a flower.
This is absolutely, and the other thing that people aren't really talking about, obviously, is the burden that can be lifted on the people that are taking care of people.
Oh,
and that doesn't get the attention that it deserves, because those people have to, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but they sometimes have to suffer silently, right? Because there's not a lot of resources for, typically it's adult children, it's the spouse, so if there's a way to offer some relief in that avenue, that could also be a positive thing, not just on the person that's taking this.
Well, and it was another reason we made it the way we made it, was this powder form versus a pill, because one of my friends who hauled Agent Orange. So he didn't even know what it was. He just was a truck driver. So he didn't spray it or anything, but he hauled it around Aberdeen, Maryland, which became an Agent Orange site all of a sudden, because they had actually experimented with it up there. And he had gotten dementia and Parkinson's. And with the dementia, if his wife, who loved him and took care of him and did everything she could for him all the time, I mean, he didn't know who she was half the time. He'd say, get out of my room. I don't know who you are. And if you handed him food, he'd throw it across the room, if he didn't like it. So we made it into this powder, and we did that so you could mix it in with yogurt. It's like, what is he like? How can the caregiver get it to the person, and whatever they like, put it in there. As long as it's a cold ingredient, then they won't argue with you. So we did think about caregivers, because I was familiar with it myself. And one of my best friends is a hospice nurse, and she knows firsthand, how that is. And, just listening to everybody and listening to nurses, basically getting together with them and sitting down the round table, a focus group I did, where I just like, what's the biggest problem here? It's like getting people to take their medicine. Well, what if they didn't know? What if it was simple? Right?
It's in the yogurt.
They just,
absolutely.
2 bites of pudding, they're done for the day.
Right.
I mean, will they do that? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Oof,
some deep stuff. Listen, I would love to be able, if there's a affiliate with the podcast, to be able to help pull the product to some of the listeners as well too. So if there's an option for that, I would love, for the listeners to benefit from what you have to offer as well too. Again, anybody listening, it's not FDA approved. It's a supplement, and we make no medical statements about this, but I encourage people to reach out to Mark for some questions too.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an affiliate program. They can, once they join the affiliate program and they give them that link, so it'll bring a particular link to them. It's like they get their own website. And the nice thing about that is it will show where those people went to. Like if they downloaded the book, it even tracks all that so they can get an idea. But then we pay generously. We pay 20% for the affiliate program, and we pay that for an entire year that person is using the product. We also have bonuses for who can get on the leaderboard and everything. So we have a really good affiliate program because everyone knows someone with this disease.
It doesn't discriminate, that is for sure. And, and at the end of the day, a lot of people have to suffer silently, and they don't have, they're, waiting for, a drug approval, or waiting for their insurance company, or just basically waiting to wither away, are very, very poor options for people. It's very
absolutely. And I think my banker said, well, if you could make people 10 to 20% better, think about this, in a nursing home where they could button their own shirt or go to the bathroom by themselves, how would that change the ratio of nurses to patients?
Right. It's shrinking significantly.
Bingo.
Shrinking significantly.
Yeah. And we're already short of nurses.
Without question. Without question.
We don't even have PSAs, people. We can't even fly on planes. we're short of everybody.
Life is fun, lads. You know, I'll tell you one thing. You know, it's an interesting time to be alive. I'll tell you that.
Yes, it is.
Where can people find you and your product? And I would love to have a follow-up conversation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, basically right here, mybrainrestore.com is the name. That is the best place to go to. And I encourage everyone to read everything first, read my journey, download the book, go through the FAQ. Mm-hmm. If your doctor doesn't understand it, there is a health section under the FAQ. They still won't understand it. Then we have our phone number in the right-hand corner. It's not AI operated. You get me or you get someone else.
Yeah.
And then we beat your doctor up.
So, you know, you blended really well with human medical conditions, tragedy, triumph, and ultimately success on the other side with grace and humility. And the fact that you're willing to share your story and help others is a testament to who you are as a person and the time you're willing to share to give this message out.
Absolutely. No, it's what it's about. We can't all do it. We can't all go down this road. We got to fix it.
No, I'm not, you know, and I'm very, very honored that you took time out of your busy schedule. And I'm looking forward to partnering with you to be able to spread this goodwill to the rest of the citizens of this country.
I'm looking forward to having you. Absolutely. You got the same spirit.
Okay.
But you got the right back for it.
You know, right. Well, now you're right, so to speak. You know, now that it's back to Hey, listen. I'll tell anybody who listen. If you go through, I didn't go through a traumatic brain injury, but when you can get off the couch and you can walk and bend down, you realize just how precious that is. Like you don't.
Yes, you do.
And you're like, okay, I'm going to think twice before I complain because I know how quickly it can be taken away. So. From the bottom of my heart, I'm very appreciative of the message that you sent on this show, and I'm honored to have you as a guest. Thank you so much. I'm glad you had me, and I appreciate you having me on. This was a lot of fun. Thank you, Mark Burnett. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was awesome, sir.